And now it's time for another Dice Tower review with Mike Vincent.
Hello, my name is Michael Vincent, and I'm a new face to the Dice Tower. I'd like to start by thanking Tom Bassel for having me part of his YouTube channel, and I'm excited today to talk to you about two video series that I'm going to be doing for the Dice Tower. The first of which is one that I'm going to talk about and focus on in this video, and the second one, well, you're just going to have to wait and see. So I'm a high school teacher, and I have a great interest in how board games can be used to enhance education, both in the classroom or how parents can use it at home to try and enhance a student's learning and interest in a unit that might be being taught at school. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos looking at educational reviews of board games. Now I know there's lots of board game reviews out there looking at just how a game is in terms of its fun factor. There's lots of videos looking at unboxings of video or instructions of games and how to play them. But for me, I'm just looking at how a game can be used in a classroom and what educational value that it might have. So please keep this in mind when you're watching my educational reviews, that I'm not necessarily looking to teach you how to play the game or how the game might rate in terms of its fun factor, but just how could a parent or a teacher use this with a young person to help them get more interested in the subject that they're learning in school, or just to help reinforce content and concepts from class. So I'm going to start today by looking at a game called Pandemic. Pandemic is a cooperative game, and there's several ways that a teacher could use this in a classroom. Firstly, the game will help reinforce geographic skills, but it can also get students to look at how they function in a group in terms of their leadership style, and it can also be a great way to introduce new students to a class and make them feel comfortable and get them working with other students. So let's take a look. So here you can see the box both for Pandemic and the expansion Pandemic on the Brink. Now Pandemic is a game designed by Matt Leacock and published by Z-Man Games. Do keep in mind that the two boxes I have here are actually an older version of Pandemic, as just this year they published a new version with a third expansion called In the Lab. Do keep in mind that you do need to use the newer versions of Pandemic and Pandemic on the Brink to function properly with the In the Lab expansion. So the two you see here are the older versions and will work together. However, if you're hoping to look at the third expansion potentially, you'll want to pick up the newer version of Pandemic and Pandemic on the Brink. So in Pandemic, you are working as a group of specialists, all with a different role and special ability, going around the world trying to stop these 4 vicious strains of diseases from spreading and taking over the world. So it's a cooperative game where you're working together, traveling across the world, using your special abilities to try and stave off these vicious diseases that are spreading very quickly. So let's take a look at the board. So here you can see the board for Pandemic, which is essentially a map of the world. Now at the beginning of the game, you are given a roll card, randomly distributed, with a picture and a special ability. You then are given a figurine that starts in Atlanta, Georgia, and then you will use your player cards to travel throughout the world and hopefully use your special abilities to slow down the disease, cure the disease, or give cards to other players so that eventually you can build up enough cards to actually stop and cure the disease and eradicate it altogether. So the player cards that you get are essentially cities from around different parts of the world. You see Tokyo, Japan, Washington, the United States, Tehran in Iran, and so you can use these cards to travel to these locations, build research centers, and work together as a team to try and pool enough cards of one color so that you can eradicate different colors of disease. So the diseases are represented by little colored cubes, and the different colors of cubes sort of represent different geographic regions where those diseases are primarily found. So the blue cubes occupy mostly North America and Europe. The yellow cubes occupy South America and Africa. The black cubes mostly occupy the Middle East, and the red cubes represent Australia and Asia. So the diseases will continue to spread throughout the world based off of the cards you draw off the top of the infection deck. So we see, for example, Shanghai, Beijing, and Mumbai, and that would mean more disease cubes would have to be placed in these locations. Now as the game goes on, the infection rate will slowly increase, and as it increases, it means you have to put even more disease cubes in the cities you draw off the top of the infection deck. So the more the diseases spread, the harder it is to contain them, and if too many diseases end up in one city, it means there will be an outbreak and they will continue to spread even further. So let's take a look at the components for Pandemic. Now I wouldn't say the components for this game are spectacular, but they certainly get the job done and they're well constructed. One of the best things I like about the Pandemic on the Brink expansion is they come with these really neat petri dishes, which add some flavor and add to the theme of the game. I do wish that you had more than just basic cubes, a pretty standard component for Euro games. I wish that maybe they'd personalize them and carve them, made them look a little bit different, but they certainly get the job done. Now you also have little wooden characters that you start the game with, and you will have little research stations which you'll place around the world as well. Now one thing I like that this game includes is reference cards. Reference cards I find are really good, especially with new players or younger players. If you're a teacher and you're going to be using this with students, these will be particularly handy. It's very quick to look down. You can take a look at the basic actions, and on the back side they have your special actions. So this will really streamline the gameplay, and you won't have to keep referring to the rulebook over and over again. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the game, you are given a role. The core set comes with 5 character roles, and the On the Brink expansion comes with even more. Some examples being the dispatcher, the medic, the archivist. Doing a good job just reminding you of what your special ability will be. Now, I did mention this game is good for enhancing geographic skills or geography skills. The board, of course, is a world map, so just by looking at the board and moving around the board, students are going to become more familiar with different cities and what part of the world they belong to. But the cards actually provide quite a bit of more specific detail. So if we look, each card has a map of the world showing where the city is, in this case Tokyo, Japan. But we also see the corresponding flag that matches that country, and it provides you with a population and the population density. So if you're studying geography, playing this game is a good way to enhance their geography skills, and they'll become more and more familiar with different parts of the world and different cities. And it's very handy that they will eventually, if they play the game enough, get to associate the different flags with the different countries, and may also start to gain a bit of an appreciation for the populations of different parts of the world. So in addition to being good for teaching geography skills, I found that Pandemic can also be very useful for teaching group dynamics and how you might function as a leader in a group. With a lot of cooperative games, and certainly with Pandemic, there is the opportunity and potential for a student who's very domineering to come in and boss around other people and take away some of the autonomy of different players. Now, the nice thing about this game is you can have students sit down, play a game, and then you can have them sit back and reflect afterwards in terms of how they function in a group. Are they the type of person that's going to sit back and let other people take control, or the type of person who's going to boss others around and be a bit controlling? This can be a really good way to teach social, emotional, and personal skills, as students will have to analyze how they work in a group, and if they are one of those bossy type of people who can rub others the wrong way, it gets them to sit back and figure out, okay, how can I change my style and incorporate others and not just be domineering and boss everyone else around. Now, of course, you're going to have to be comfortable enough with your students to have these conversations, but in middle school and in high school, they should be able to handle it, and it's actually a useful tool for getting students to perhaps work on their leadership skills and make sure they're incorporating others. On the flip side, for people who are more shy and perhaps don't step up and give their opinion, you can get them to focus, if they play again, on stepping in, trying to take more risks, and working with other players. So a final way you could use Pandemic in a classroom is to actually introduce new students, either to your school or to your classroom, to other students in the class or the school. So because of the cooperative nature of Pandemic, it's very good for getting new people introduced with other people in the class, get them talking, get them working together, and perhaps match them with other students who you feel they could potentially make friendships with. So I've used this before when I've had new students to my class. I will perhaps arrange a game for after school or at lunchtime, and very quickly, because of the cooperative and collaborative nature of Pandemic, they'll start opening up, they'll be talking, and at the end of the game they feel good because they've worked together, and this can sometimes be a very good way to help a new student make friends, or just to make them feel more comfortable and introduce them to other members of your class or the school community. To conclude, I think Pandemic is a fantastic game, both in terms of its general fun factor and in terms of its educational value. It's a very highly ranked game on Board Game Geek. Hardcore gamers seem to love Pandemic, and if you like cooperative games, it's very fun, well designed, and plays in about an hour from 2 to 4 players. But if you want to use this in a classroom, it's great because it reinforces geography skills, it helps students learn how they function in a group, and it can be used to introduce new players to other students in the class. So thanks very much for watching. I'm going to include my Twitter and my email at the bottom of the screen. If you have any suggestions, if you can think of any other ways you could use Pandemic in a classroom or in an educational setting, or just if you want to ask a question or leave a comment, or perhaps recommend another game you'd like me to take a look at in terms of its educational value, please email me. I'll be happy to respond. Thanks once again to Tom Bassel for having me on the Dice Tower, and I look forward to making more videos very shortly. So have a great weekend, and thanks for watching.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.